Hemisync. I want to get back to hemisync.
Okay.
And you know, basically, you got the CIA gateway tapes when they were studying, you know, psychic abilities, right? The CIA has always been interested in studying, you know, the ability to hack the human mind, right? And the limits or the limitless of the human brain, right? This goes back from inception of the CIA. It goes all the way to Alan Turing, right? And Alan Turing can be known as the father of the modern, you know, AI or algorithm, right?
Yes.
He was a white boy from England who was also a homosexual, and they didn't recognize him because of his sexual lifestyle. But when, you know, he published these papers basically modeling the ideas of algorithms and artificial intelligence.
They couldn't ignore him.
Right. And a lot of these programs that the CIA started to run, where it was the MK Ultra, the MK Kitty programs, where they were studying how to control the human mind, whether it was through sex, whether it was through frequency, vibration. They had all of these programs that were known by the public in the 70s and
LSD,
60s.
right.
LSD, that it was published in the newspaper that this is what they were doing. But anyway, during that time, they had the hemisync tapes, and what they were studying was how to maximize the capacity of the human brain, right? And what they would learn was that they could, you know, play certain frequencies in certain parts of the ear. So one frequency will be playing in the other ear, another one start listening in the other ear. So you got your left and your right brain. And at a certain point in time, they start shifting with each other, and it starts syncing both left and right hemisphere of the brain, right? And they talked about basically getting you up to that peak state, which was in the gamma frequency, which was 40 hertz, right? And, you know, once you want to like calm down and you're in relaxation, you listen to more 6 hertz, right? Where you in dream state and imagination. And so, you know, the average person doesn't, we listen to all kind of frequencies nowadays. People listen to 9,000 to 432 to 440, just, we go frequency crazy. But we don't actually know how to entrain ourselves and to go through the process of listening to frequencies in a way where it can actually unlock the human brain, and your left and right hemisphere of your brain is connected.
Because oscillation.
Oscillation. So when we look at a lot of those things that went viral back in the day, where it was like, yo, do you see the dress as red or you see it as green, right? It was because either saying that you are more attuned to your left side or your right side, right? But what happens when you're attuned with both sides and they are in sync with each other? Now your whole brain is connecting dots and seeing things from a more spherical manner rather than a square box, or I'm only seeing through my ego, or I'm only seeing through creativity. No, now we're both synced up, and now we can maximize our output at all times, and there are no blockages, right? Can you tell me your experience with, first of all, tell me your experience with frequencies, specifically the ones that are good and bad, and some of your knowledge on that process.
Frequencies that are good and frequencies that are bad.
And no bad in terms of moral.
Quote unquote, right. I had to study the science of frequencies to fully understand the 44. And in particular, me researching 44 and understanding that this frequency, as powerful as it can definitely be weaponized, right? And the military utilizes this frequency because the word military equals 44.
Dr. Wesley talked about, and I talked about with Sci High about the weaponization of frequencies.
Yes, so
particularly in music.
In particular, when the Rockefellers, and particular first the Nazis, when they set the musical standard, or they suggested that the musical standard be changed to A440 in the 30s, and when the Rockefellers locked it in 55 and made it the international standard, the tuning frequency for all instruments, what they were doing is they were aligning A440, when you make A440, automatically F sharp becomes what's called a double interval. And I believe it was 741, you know, I'm sure that they'll correct me if I'm wrong, but nonetheless, F sharp sets at what was called a devil's interval. So for the untrained ear, what they're always hearing at that particular frequency is a disruption of our subatomic subtle energy bodies that's being attacked, right? And if they're able to break down us on a subatomic level, utilizing frequency, once again, the things that we're projecting from our hologram, from our DNA, is gonna be disruptive. So this is how you create chaos in your environment. This is how you create constant, calamity or just confusion. And then it's very easy to rule from that place if the people are always disorganized. If I'm turning up a frequency and the shape that it's creating is a cube as opposed to a circle, which is 432, which is resonating like this at all times, right? It's circumambulating, right? So this is negative ion energy creating positive effects, heartfelt energy, love, right? This the energy of nature, it's the heart frequency,
versus like judgment,
versus,
right? And racism. So
confusion,
not to cut your wisdom,
right, yeah.
but to add on to the cipher of thought, when I think about the non-judgmental mind, right? When you walk into a room, certain parts of your consciousness are triggered by your biases, right? If I walk in and I see a white man with a swastika on his body, perhaps I'm going to be triggered. You understand me?
Yeah,
because, or if I see somebody of a different weight class or sex or sexual preference or whatever,
color hair,
you may, you see somebody dressed a certain way, you trigger, your judgment starts to populate.
Right.
And those judgments are blocks. You understand me? It's predetermined blocks of thought that you have. Instead of walking in non-judgmental, so now your brain is just flowing. You're in a flow state with everything that's going on. Nothing is stopping your brain from connecting and moving and flowing.
Here, you just
and that's how you stay tapped in at all times to be in a non-judgmental state. So it's like you dealing with somebody that's yelling and tripping, and then you get on that frequency and start yelling and tripping instead of being in control of it.
Right, instead of being
never having to be in the vibration.
Flowing like water.
Yeah.
I'm going over here.
I got my own atmosphere.
You know what I'm saying?
So like one of the things I teach is how to be in that state of non-judgmental so that you can always be in that higher consciousness into the flow state where your consciousness has to be like a sphere where it's always rolling with the punches. Bruce Lee said it best, be like water.
Be like water.
But most people are like ice cubes.
Right.
Because ice cube is just a state of change of frequency. You understand me? At a proton arrangement within the water.
So it should be like flowing water.
Yeah, be like flowing water.
To be like water, you could be ice.
Yeah.
And you could be stuck.
Yeah.
You could be in that cube state.
That's
right?
exactly.
As opposed to being fluid, it's still the same 360. The circle is the same 360 as the square.
Right.
Right? But you can be solid mass formulated into volume, or you could be fluid mass, you know what I'm saying? That's continuously moving in motion. And we're water, so these are decisions that we have to make.
Right.
Right? Because so if we think about ourselves as water and we move through the dynamics of water, understanding the stages of water, then we'll understand ourselves even better as well.
Right.
The more I started researching water, I learned myself better. The more I started researching
That's a fact.
crystals and minerals, the more I learned myself better.
Let's go to crystals.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to talk about crystalline states specifically. I have a way of observing the world where I find, synchronistic things and I apply meaning, right? And, in the Quran, there's a statement, over it are 19. And there's taught to be a 19 frequency within the Quran, that basically states that this Quran was untampered with because certain surahs and verses adds to the number 19.
It's a seal.
It's a seal.
Yes.
And without that, then you can see that there has been corruption added into because it's no longer the original word.
Shows the mathematical profession is sealed in numerics. You know what I'm saying? It's a precise mathematical formula.
Right.
Whereas we can go to the Helios Biblos and we can see that there was.
And they tell you they changed it.
Tampering, yeah.
You changed it for this version and that version and that version, his version.
So even frequencies, because words add up to frequency. Let's take Hebrew, for instance, as an alphanumeric system, meaning the letters equal numbers, right?
Yeah, in Hebrew, the number 19 gonna hit you down to 1.
Right, so the letters equal numbers. A letter is a energy. A word, though, is synergy. So two letters put together now formulate a word. So these two letters or energy signatures are now bridged and they formulate a new entire energy spectrum. So now that's a synergistic relationship between these two frequencies, right? And look at it like a container. And with that particular container, this particular frequency, in that particular container, I can identify this container is identical to that container. So let's take 44, for instance. In Hebrew, 44 equals blood, right? Numerically. blood, right? But then it also equals Mars, right? So we know that Mars and Aries and blood all go together. You know what I'm saying? And when we go to gematria, we find out, so gematria is the numerical counting system of these particular words, right? We find the word brain equals 44. We find the word light equals 44, right? And when we go to the brain itself, inside of the brain, we find that the area of the brain that's responsible for language creation, semantics, and music perception is an area called Brodmann's 44, right? So and then we create music in 4/4 bars or 16 bars, right? We still are constricted or confined to these aspects of utilizing 4, which is the door, when we create these things which are gateways between this dimension and the next.
So I wanted to get something though, because what I was getting to with the Quran, when we're talking about crystalline and frequencies, there's something called, Christ consciousness.
Yes.
Right? Now the Quran in the chapter 19, verse 19,
okay,
you understand me, is where they introduce the birth of Christ.
All right.
Right? Now, and my understanding and breaking down is that when you live a certain way, whether it's chants, hymns, prayers, crystals, whatever it is, it starts to vibrate you on a certain frequency. And you always at that frequency. It's like when I hit this and it's going down until they get to the point where you can no longer hear it. And if you pay attention to that, then your consciousness is also
ear, though.
Yeah, with that ear. But that, let's say that the top of the ting, let's say that you always in that structure.
Right.
You understand me? And let's say that high vibration is Christ consciousness.
Yes.
Right? Where there's rules and orders constructed to stay in that consciousness at all times.
Hold that frequency.
Otherwise, things will bring you down. You go from ding till you start fiddling down. So one of those things was, of course, people do meditation, right? To try to maintain, and meditation is a form of being able to hemisync the brain from left and right hemisphere as well. People do prayers. Muslims pray 5 times a day to stay consistently synced in and tapped into that higher consciousness. And then it goes into your deeds, right? And how you're consistently moving and doing good, and you're always vibrating high.
Right, random acts of kindness, keeping that heart chakra open. Right.
You get to that point where you at the Messiah frequency. You understand me? And once you are interlocked into that frequency, then you at that Christ consciousness to where you're always pouring from that higher level. Everything you do, every deed, the way you make people feel when they interact with your energy, your light, you tapped into that Christ energy. But that Christ energy is, Christ meaning crusher, so it also comes to change things, right? Like in the Bible, they talk about, Jesus coming in and, flipping over the tables and giving people rules on how they supposed to live, to tap in, because he basically saying that, look, if y'all want to be on God time, you want to have that mind of God, this is what you got to lock into. You understand me? And the people like, shit, we trying to gamble and fornicate and, you know what I'm saying? We trying to do our sinning and granted. And you trying to put us on God time. But he's like, listen, man, y'all ain't got no choice. I'm on God time. Y'all got to be on God time.
Right.
Because he came to crush.
Right.
So once you get to a certain extent, and people may call it self-righteousness. Right. When you see somebody particularly living a certain way of life, and then they want other people to join on and live that life as well, they are now judged by people who's not on that frequency. Now, the greater part of that is a person being able to live that life and not judge others, but still find a way to get everybody to want to be on that frequency through inspiration, through example setting.
Yes.
You understand me? Now, when we talk about crystals form based on the vibration of the environment. You understand me? Why some crystals are going to come out perfectly formed and other ones weren't, based on, the shape and the frequency allowing them to grow outward.
Pressure, right.
The pressure.